Magic Earth, Chapter 3. The snow bit like shattered glass as they rode. Reinar slumped over his saddle, his face as white as the surrounding landscape, his breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. The blood staining his cloak had already frozen, forming a dark crust that shone under the faint winter sun. Jack held the reins so tightly his fingers were numb, not from the cold, but from the fear coiling in his chest like a snake. The mysterious man's words echoed relentlessly. The creature will find the king. Theodore rode ahead, his shoulders tense, his eyes fixed on the southern horizon where Eldoria should appear at any moment. There was no more time for caution, for rest, or for strategy. All that remained was speed, and the desperate hope that it wasn't already too late. Lady Selith stayed beside Reinar, murmuring low enchantments that seemed to ease his pain slightly. But even her magic, the strongest among them, felt fragile against what they had witnessed. 5 men dead in seconds, weapons ripped from the air like toys, a power so absolute it defied everything they thought they knew about the limits of magic. "How long now?" Jack asked, his voice raw. 2 hours, Theodore replied without looking back. Maybe less if the horses hold up. Selith looked up at the sky. "We need to pray that's enough." The wind howled in reply, carrying snow and something else. A distant, almost imperceptible whisper, like the beat of massive wings slicing the air. Jack turned in his saddle, scanning the northern horizon. Nothing. Just infinite white and the oppressive silence of the ice veins. But he felt it. Something was watching them from a distance, something immense and patient, waiting for the right moment. He pressed his heels against his horse's flank and galloped faster. Eldoria appeared like a mirage through the snow, dark stone walls etched against the gray sky, towers rising like spears aimed at the void. But something was different. Even miles away, Jack could see the movement. Silhouettes rushing along the ramparts, soldiers positioning themselves in a defensive formation, banners snapping in the freezing wind. "The king already knows," Selith murmured. "Impossible," Theodore replied. "We had no way to send a message." "Then he felt it," she said, her tone dark. "Or worse, he has already seen." They accelerated their descent down the snowy slope. When they reached the gates, 2 guards crossed their halberds. "Identify yourselves!" "Theodore and Jack Vance," the father shouted. "We carry urgent news for His Majesty." The guards hesitated, seeing the state of the group. Only 4 where there should have been 8. Reinar nearly unconscious, everyone covered in frozen blood. One of them ran inside while the other held his ground. Moments later, the heavy iron doors groaned open. "His Majesty awaits in the Hall of Winds. Come." The castle buzzed like an attacked beehive. Soldiers ran through the corridors carrying weapons, armor, and supplies. Servants stacked barrels of water and food on the upper floors. Scribes burned documents in fireplaces, preparing for the worst. No one spoke loudly, but the panic vibrated in the air like a stretched cord about to snap. Jack and Theodore were led through 3 gates to the main hall. Airo stood before the great stone table, surrounded by his advisors and military commanders. Maps covered the entire surface, marked with symbols in red and black ink. When he saw them enter, the king's face, always serene, always controlled, showed something Jack had never expected to see. Fear. Not the common fear of men before the unknown. It was the terror of one who understands that something impossible is happening, and there is no way to stop it. "Report," Airo commanded, his voice sharp as an ice blade. Theodore stepped forward, still breathless from the ride. "Majesty, we encountered a man in the ice veins. He attacked us, killed 5 of our soldiers with—" He hesitated, searching for words. "With magic we have never seen. Absolute telekinesis. He controlled all the weapons at once, turned them against us. He didn't even need to get close. A murmur rippled through the advisors. Airo leaned over the table, his fingers pressing into the wood. Describe him. Dark hair with gray streaks, Theodore said. A torn fur cloak, eyes like iron. Not more than 40, perhaps. And when he was finished, he simply vanished, as if the air had folded around him. The control over the weapons, asked Selith. Was it partial? Was visible effort involved? Theodore shook his head. None. He moved 5 swords at the same time as if they were one. As if there were no limit at all. An elderly advisor, with a white beard and heavy robes, stepped forward. Majesty, this is impossible. Not even your Majesty, with all respect, can maintain precise control over more than 3 objects simultaneously, and only for minutes. I know, Airo replied, his voice strained. That is why I am worried. He turned to Theodore. Did he say anything? Give any clue as to who he is or where he came from? He said we were fools for serving the king, that he once believed the same lie we still serve, and when my son asked if he knew what the creature was, Theodore hesitated. He said Jack had seen it, and that it had seen Jack back. All eyes turned to Jack. Airo approached slowly, his gaze penetrating. He knew your name? No, Majesty, Jack replied. But he seemed to recognize me somehow. And the message? The king pressed. You said he left a message. Theodore nodded gravely. He said to tell your Majesty that there is no need to hunt the creature, because it is already hunting your Majesty. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Airo nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already feared. I know. It has already been sighted. 4 times in the last few hours, each time closer. Circling the city like a bird of prey assessing its target. He turned to the military commander, a burly man in heavy armor with countless battle scars. Commander Darius, how many men do we have ready? 200 Royal Guard soldiers, Majesty, plus 300 summoned from the local militia, 500 total. Against a man who kills 5 trained soldiers in seconds, Airo murmured, and a creature that can carry grown cows through the air. He paused. It will not be enough, but it is all we have. One of the advisors stepped forward. Majesty, we should evacuate the castle. Take your Majesty to safety while... No. Airo cut him off, his voice like thunder. I will not run. If this man is coming for me, let him come. I will face whatever he brings. He looked around the room. But I will not force anyone to die with me. Whoever wishes to leave may leave, with no dishonor. No one moved. Airo nodded, something akin to pride crossing his face. Then we prepare. Darius, position archers on all towers. I want ballistas at the high points and boiling oil at the gates. If a giant creature comes from the sky... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The order spread through Eldoria like fire in dry straw. Every man capable of holding a weapon was to report to the castle immediately. Jack watched from the hall window as the inner courtyard filled with people. Farmers with pitchforks and axes, merchants with rusty swords, even teenagers with improvised spears made from broom handles and tied on knives. They were not soldiers. They were just frightened men answering the king's call because they had no choice. His father was among them now, receiving an ill-fitting piece of armor and a shield marked with the royal crest, Airo's stylized wind. Jack ran down the stairs, his heart pounding. Father! Theodore turned, his expression stern, but his eyes betraying worry. Jack, you should be with your mother and Liz. I've already sent word for them to take refuge in the caves with the other civilians. I'm not leaving you here alone. You have no choice, Theodore replied, firm. You are not a soldier. You have no training. You would only get in the way. But, no. His father's voice cracked like a whip. That is an order. Protect your mother and sister. That is your mission." Jack opened his mouth to protest, but something in Theodore's gaze silenced him. It was not anger. It was fear. The fear of a father who might be seeing his son for the last time. They embraced quickly, with the urgency of those who know time has run out. "I love you, son," Theodore whispered. "No matter what happens, remember that." Then he pulled away, taking his place among the other defenders. Jack stood there, helpless, watching his father transform into just one more makeshift soldier in a doomed army. A horn echoed from the towers. 3 long blasts, sighting. Panic erupted in the courtyard, men shouting orders, armor clanking, horse hooves beating against the stone. Jack raced to the nearest rampart, climbing the steps 2 at a time until he reached the top. What he saw stole his breath. On the northern horizon, 2 figures were approaching. The first was human, a solitary silhouette walking calmly through the snow, his dark cloak billowing behind him like raven wings. The man from the ice veins. But it was the second figure that made the world seem to stop. Behind him, moving with the deliberate slowness of a nightmare, came it. The creature. For the first time in the full light of day, Jack could see it completely, and his mind struggled to process what his eyes showed him. It was impossible. It couldn't exist. And yet, there it was. A dragon. Not like in the embellished legends, not like in the children's tales of noble, majestic beasts. This was primitive terror made of flesh and bone. Its body was the size of 10 horses put together, perhaps more. Scales black as onyx covered its back, each one as large as a shield, reflecting the light at impossible angles. Between the scales, feathers of a deep, sinister blue sprouted like frozen flames. The wings stretched so wide their shadow covered the snow for dozens of yards, leather membranes interwoven with bones that looked like black glass. The head was both reptilian and avian, an elongated snout full of teeth like daggers, golden eyes that glowed with an ancient, cruel intelligence. When it opened its mouth, steam escaped. Not white like common breath, but tinged with blue, as if the cold itself inhabited inside it. "By the gods," a soldier whispered beside Jack. "Dragons don't exist," another muttered, his voice shaking. "They never have. They're just legends." "Then we're watching a legend walk," a third replied, making the sign of protection. Others recited prayers, or simply stood paralyzed with terror. Below, in the courtyard, Darius yelled orders. "Defensive formation! Pikemen to the front! Archers on the towers!" The men obeyed with the slowness of those moving through a nightmare. The mysterious man and the dragon kept advancing, not running, not flying, just walking, as if they had all the time in the world, because they did. Next to Jack, an archer knocked an arrow with trembling hands. "What is that man?" he whispered. "How does he control a thing like that?" "I don't know," Jack replied, "but he killed 5 soldiers without even touching them." The archer paled even more. They stopped 100 yards from the gates. The man stood, motionless, his hands clasped in front of him, calm like someone waiting in line at a fair. The dragon landed beside him, its enormous claws sinking into the frozen earth with the ease of knives through butter. It folded its wings against its body, the sound like sails being taken in after a storm, and lowered its head until it was level with the man, as if waiting for orders, as if it were a dog, not a monster. The silence lasted an eternity. Then the man spoke, and his voice echoed clear and strong, as if he stood next to every person, not shouting from a distance. "I bring a message for Airo, Mage King of the North. Send him out to speak with me." Darius strode to the edge of the rampart, his armor gleaming under the weak sun. "Identify yourself. Who are you, and what do you want with His Majesty?" The man tilted his head, almost amused. "My name does not matter. My will does. Every man who demands an audience with the king must state his identity and purpose. Darius shouted. "Those are the laws." The man smiled, a cold, humorless smile. Laws. What an interesting word coming from one about to break them all. He took a step forward. "Here is my message. Let me speak with Airo, or I will enter by force and kill everyone who stands in my way. I do not care about your names, your families, or your loyalties. I only care about what I came for. Give me that, and no one else needs to die." "And what exactly did you come for?" Darius yelled. The man did not answer directly. "That is a matter between the king and me." "Then your answer is no!" Darius turned to the archers. "Ready, at my command." "Commander," the man's voice sliced the air like a blade, "do you truly believe your army can stop me?" He paused. "Let me make your decision easier." He raised a hand and placed it lightly on the dragon's head. "My companion here is hungry. He has not eaten for 3 days. 1 cow was not enough. But 500 men?" He stroked the black scales. 500 men will be an adequate feast." The dragon opened its mouth, not roaring, just letting the blue steam escape. And the sound that came out was a low, deep purr, like thunder underground. Murmurs of panic raced through the ramparts. "A dragon. He controls a dragon. How is that possible? What kind of mage is this?" "Then let me be clear," the man continued, his tone casual, almost bored. "You will not destroy me. You cannot even destroy my companion. Try if you wish. Fire your arrows, throw your spears. You will see how they break against scales older than your kingdoms." Darius clenched his jaw, his face red with rage and humiliation. "You think we can be intimidated by tricks? By illusions?" "Illusions?" The man laughed, a dry, joyless sound. "Commander, what you see behind me is not an illusion. It is the truth your kings have hidden from you for centuries." His expression hardened. "This is a dragon. Not just any monster. Not a mutated beast. A dragon. A creature of the first era, when magic was absolute and men trembled under the skies. And he obeys me." "How?" someone yelled from the rampart. "How do you do that?" The man looked in the direction of the voice. "Because I understand what you have forgotten. Because I found what you never looked for. Because I did not settle for scraps of power." He took another step. "And now I have come for what is mine by right." From the top of the highest tower came Airo's voice, amplified by magic, echoing over the castle. "Stop where you are. Say what you came to say. I will not hide from you." The man looked up at the tower, his eyes gleaming. Finally, some sense. He stepped forward. "I came for something that belongs to me, Airo. Something that appeared on your lands, but which is not yours to keep." "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I am talking about." He paused deliberately. "Hand over what you found atop your tower after my companion's first visit, and I will leave. Refuse, and you will learn why dragons were feared for millennia." Airo did not reply immediately. When he spoke, his voice trembled, not with fear, but with contained fury. "I do not know what you speak of." The stranger sighed, like an adult disappointed with a stubborn child. "Lies do not serve you well, Airo. But if you want the deaths to begin—" He raised his hand. The dragon roared, and this time it was not a purr. It was a sound that tore the sky, that made the castle stones tremble, that ripped screams of terror from hundreds of throats at once. The scream they had heard that first night. The scream that had announced the world was changing. "Attack!" Darius screamed, desperate. The arrows flew. Hundreds of them, slicing the air in a deadly cloud. They struck the dragon and shattered. They simply broke against the scales like toothpicks against steel. The dragon didn't even flinch. "Pathetic," the man murmured. He made a gesture with his hand. The ground trembled. Cracks exploded in the snow, racing towards the gates like stone snakes. The iron gates, each weighing tons, were ripped from their hinges and hurled aside as if they were made of paper. The crash was deafening. "Formation! Hold the line!" Darius shouted. The soldiers advanced, spears raised, shields lifted. The man didn't even look at them. He raised both hands and pushed. The air vibrated. The first line of soldiers, 20 men, was thrown back as if struck by an invisible tidal wave. They flew dozens of yards, slammed against walls, fell in cries of broken bones and dented armor. Some did not get up again. "Last chance," the man said, his voice calm. "Whoever leaves now, lives. Whoever stays, dies." For a moment, no one moved. Then one soldier dropped his spear and ran. Then another, and another. In seconds, the rout began. Men in a panic fleeing through side gates, jumping over walls, abandoning positions. More than half the makeshift army deserted in less than a minute. Darius screamed orders, threatened executions, but it was useless. Fear was stronger than loyalty. The man watched the escape with a neutral expression. Then he started walking again, slowly, methodically. The dragon followed him, each step making the earth shudder. Jack from the rampart saw his father still holding position, one of the few who remained. His heart plummeted. Jack watched, paralyzed, as the stranger crossed the courtyard. The soldiers who remained tried to form defensive lines, but they were too few now, no more than 50 demoralized men facing a power they couldn't possibly counter. His father was among them. Jack saw Theodore grip his sword hilt, his face pale but determined. "No!" Jack shouted, running for the stairs. Hands grabbed him. "Let go of me. My father is down there." It was Selith, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "There's nothing you can do." "I don't care. I won't let him die alone." He tore himself free from her grasp and ran down. The courtyard was chaos. Wounded soldiers groaning, others running in all directions, shouted orders no one heard. Jack pushed his way through until he was close to his father. "Jack, for the love of the gods, run." "Not without you." Theodore tried to push him back, but there was no time. The man was only 10 yards away now. He stopped, assessing the remaining defenders with disinterest. "Brave," he said, "but stupid." He raised his hand. 3 spears, ripped from the hands of the fallen soldiers in the corridor, floated into the hall, gleaming in the torchlight. They spun in the air, their points all aimed at their owners. "Please," Darius pleaded, all pride gone. "We are just soldiers. We follow orders. We did not choose to die for this." "But you chose to stay," the man replied, "which is much the same thing." The spears flew. 3 men fell, dead before they hit the ground. Jack felt bile rise in his throat. The stranger continued advancing. The dragon stayed behind, near the destroyed gates, watching like a patient sentinel. Soldiers who tried to attack it with flaming arrows saw the arrows turn to ash in the air before they even touched it. When a group tried to advance with swords, the man simply raised his hand, and they were all lifted from the ground at once, suspended in the air like puppets. He closed his fist. The men were hurled in all directions, crashing against stones and walls. Groans filled the air. It was a massacre. It was not a battle. It was a slow, deliberate execution. In 5 minutes, the stranger crossed the entire courtyard. The bodies of 30 soldiers marked his path. He climbed the steps of the main tower. No one else tried to stop him. Jack and Theodore followed, along with the few defenders who remained. No more than 10 men, including a wounded Darius. They reached the Hall of Winds. Airo waited alone, standing before the great window, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore no armor. He held no weapon. He simply waited, with the calm of one who has accepted his fate. The man entered without haste, his cloak stained with blood, but not his own. For a long moment, He simply watched Airo in silence. "You," he said at last, "must be the Mage King of the North. Airo, the controller of the wind." Airo turned slowly. "And who exactly are you? A conqueror? A madman? A demon from the ancient legends?" The man smiled slightly. "None of the three. I am merely someone who discovered the truth your ancestors concealed." "What truth?" "That magic was never weak. You are." He came closer. "For centuries, your mages' kings contented themselves with scraps, moving coins, changing colors, reading superficial thoughts, and you called that power. You built kingdoms on fragility and pretended it was strength." He pointed to the window. "But the prophecies were always right. The first era never ended. It merely slept, and now it awakens." He looked around the hall, his eyes settling on Jack and Theodore by the wall. "A father and son," he observed. "Family loyalty. Admirable." He approached them. Jack instinctively recoiled, but Theodore took a step forward, placing himself between the stranger and his son. "Don't touch my son." The man assessed him with something akin to curiosity. "You have magic, weak but present. And yet you stand here, ready to die defending the boy." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because I am his father," Theodore replied simply. The man watched him for a long moment. Then he turned back to Airo. "Last chance. Hand over what you found." "No." The stranger sighed. "Very well." He looked at Theodore. "You, the loyal father. You will be the example of what happens to those who refuse to obey." He raised his hand. 5 swords, ripped from the fallen soldiers in the corridor, floated into the hall, shining in the torchlight. They spun in the air, their points all aimed at Theodore. "Quick," the man said, "without suffering." Theodore closed his eyes, his body tense, awaiting the impact. Airo took a step forward uselessly. Selith covered her mouth, helpless. Jack saw the stranger's finger move, the mental command being given. The swords prepared to fly, and something inside Jack, something deep, primitive, absolute, refused. It was not thought. It was not a choice. It was a necessity. A refusal so complete, so visceral, that it ripped through every fiber of his being. He couldn't let it happen. He couldn't. "No!" The scream tore from his throat, and the world stopped. The air exploded. An invisible wave expanded from Jack like a pulse, not of sound, not of force, but of absence. A void so deep that it devoured all the magic around it. The 5 swords halted in the air. They simply froze, millimeters from Theodore. For an instant, they hung suspended, 5 deadly blades trapped between motion and stillness. Then, one by one, they fell,